Okay, I'm back, it's Garnet, and what I'd like to do is look more closely at the 7 different brain networks that are found in the brain gym. By list, and this is not in a particular order necessarily, but you've got the default mode network, which is actually, I believe, the first one to be appreciated. I don't remember exactly, I think it was maybe about 12 years ago that a neuroscientist came across this premise and proved it to be true. So you can see that the brain network appreciation is relatively new. So we've got default mode network, cognitive control network, limbic network, and then dorsal attention and ventral attention networks, and then visual and the somatomotor network. And they have names that are either strange or not, but that's what they're called. Now, please understand that neuroscience is a broad field, that there are a lot of specialties and subspecialties, and not everybody uses precisely the same terminology. The jargon can be similar or different, so don't be surprised if you're encountering information and some of these names are the same, or some of them are kind of similar and you're a little bit confused. One of the big challenges in science, and certainly in academics, is when you have different specialties studying the same thing but from their own point of view. In the past they weren't even talking to each other much, and fortunately now, because of communications and the internet, there is a better chance that they'll be interrelating, but they can still be quite separate. Okay. I'm going to first talk about what I call the big 3. Please understand that some of these concepts are my own. I can't guarantee that they're at the highest level of understanding, but it's my best shot to investigate, interpret, and apply quite sometimes demanding aspects of neuroscience into an application which is useful. So, the big 3. What do I call the big 3? The default mode network, cognitive control network, and the limbic network. Okay. The default mode network, as you can tell by the name itself, its title, the default mode. It's like the default browser on your computer. You know, when you open it up, it goes to that. And the default mode network is made up of a number of different parts of the brain. Remember the concept of a network, like a team coming together, then going back to its own tasks. The default mode network is where we go when we're not in a specific task mode. Hence the name default mode network. Now, it's not meditation, because meditation, it typically is a task, and we all know there are about 1,000 kinds of meditation, so even that risks oversimplification. The default mode network is a kind of relaxed, but I don't even mean specifically the relaxation, because you can also have task-related relaxation. It's like daydreaming, listening to a good story, kind of watching the clouds without even being so conscious of it. The default mode network, interestingly, seems to also have a quality of home, of me, the natural sense of me, just me as existing without task, is the default mode network. And that's a good thing. It's a very good thing. I sometimes think, like if you have a car, like a 4-speed, 4 on the floor, as we used to say, default mode network is a bit like neutral. It's an important place to be. It lets you go from there to other things, but there's no specific gear that you're in at that time. It's neutral. Default mode network. I think some of you know by now I use analogies a lot. I hope they help. They may not be perfectly accurate, but you get the idea. So the default mode network. Now, interestingly, the default mode network can be interrupted. And that interruption is fruitful, although kind of unusual, can be controversial. For example, when we dream in sleep, REM sleep, dream sleep, rapid eye movement, the default mode network is interrupted at that point. And remember the idea that it's kind of home, it's kind of me, in this open, loose mode, non-task. Well, you can see in dreams how that whole sense of me, the continuity of things, sort of loosens up, and linear storytelling kind of comes apart, and it's a very provocative state, and it's regular. We have it all the time. It's part of a healthy process, apparently, and that relates to the default mode network. And that's when the default mode network goes offline. The default mode network is also involved in certain pathologies. For example, the two big A's, Alzheimer's and autism, show examples of a chronically destabilized default mode network. That sense of me is certainly having a hard time managing itself. Also, hallucinogens will interrupt the default mode network, or aspects of the default mode network. And even certain meditation styles, there's a very broad range of destabilizing influences that can affect the brain by interrupting or disorganizing the default mode network. So the default mode network, because it's involved in non-task, I take the risk of saying that if a person cannot turn it off, buzz, buzz, task, task, do, think, fortifying the default mode network, reinforcing the default mode network would seem like a good thing. The default mode network in terms of brain exercise is really fundamental. You can always use it to help a person in basic functions. It's a kind of a go-to if you want to work in the brain gym. You're not exactly sure what brain reinforcements would work, what network reinforcements would work. You have a hard time going wrong with the default mode network. That's why it's called the default mode. Okay, I think what I'll do now is pause, give it a break, not make it too long, and I'm going to come back on the next segment with the other two of what I call the big three. I said there's default mode network, cognitive control network, and limbic network. So we've talked a little bit now about the default mode network, and I'll come back and let's see if we can jump into cognitive control and the limbic network. Okay, thanks.